Go ahead.
Okay, my full name is Roger Quinn Gaines. My branch of service was the U.S. Army Infantry, and I retired at the highest rank as a Lieutenant Colonel.
Okay, what were you doing and where did you live before the war?
Well, before the war I was in the Army. I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana, as a matter of fact, and Fort Bragg, Fort Polk, and then Korea, and then I came back and I went to the career course for infantry captains at Fort Benning, and after I left there I went to Vietnam.
Can you remember the day the war began?
I really don't remember the day the war began because it was really ongoing since the French were fighting over there and lost their war in 1954 at Dien Bien Phu. We started sending advisors over there in 1962, and I went in 1966 for my first tour.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, I went to the military academy at West Point, graduating in 1959, so I came in as a second lieutenant in branch infantry.
What were your first days in the service like?
Well, it was quite a change being in the Army from being at West Point. I started out by going to the basic course at Fort Benning and Airborne and Ranger School. I think what was nice about it, they were all regular Army second lieutenants that were contemporaries of mine or from Texas A&M and other like schools. So it was really pretty enjoyable for that first 6 months of training.
Is there any one event that stands out in your mind as pertaining to your earlier days in the military?
I think the thing that I really enjoyed was the camaraderie between myself and the other junior officers, the commonality of goals that we had, the learning experiences that we had by working with good non-commissioned officers, what we learned from the non-commissioned officers. One of the things they said, keep your eyes open and your mouth shut, and that's about what you do. Another really key thing was the establishment of a relationship with minorities. When I was at the military academy in high school, we didn't have any minorities, and I think one black in my class. And when I became a platoon leader, my platoon sergeant was black, and I had about half of the platoon black. And it was a very interesting experience to learn to relate to these people and learn from them. And I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Where did you serve during the war?
Well, I served in Vietnam, a total of a little over 2 years. 1 year as with an American unit in the 1st Cavalry Division, and 1 year as an advisor to the Vietnamese Army.
Would you rather have been in a different theater?
Well, in this case, there wasn't a different theater like there was in World War II. You could fight either on the European front or fight in the Pacific. Of course, Vietnam was just Vietnam. I would have preferred to fight in the European theater, but there wasn't any war in that theater, unfortunately.
What was your job assignment?
I started out in the 1st Cav Division as operations in G3, and then went down to a battalion where I was a company commander for my first tour. My second tour, I was an advisor to a Vietnamese regiment, and I spent the last 5.5 months in the personnel directorate in Saigon, in J1.
What did you think of your job assignment?
Well, I think they were very good. It was a good experience. Everybody wanted to be a company commander, and you could get one for 6 months, and you know, that's just something that we had been trained to do. The career course that I went to for 9 months prior to my first tour in Vietnam was training to be a company commander and or staff officer at battalion or brigade level, and so most of the captains that went over with me were looking to become a company commander or a staff officer at battalion level.
Were you ever invoked in combat or involved in combat?
Yes, both in 1966 and 7 with the 1st Cav, and 1969 and 70 with as an advisor.
Is there an experience in combat that you remember vividly?
Well, there are a lot of experiences. I mean, they're not good experiences. I mean, most of them are sad because whenever there was an action, somebody normally gets hurt. Particularly in 1966 in December, when Sam Bird, who had been in the career course with me, you know, got caught in a fire base in an ambush and got shot in the head. And his first sergeant came carrying him off the landing zone, saying, you know, trying to save him, and he was saved. But you know, then his company was up, and the commander said, "Well, now it's your company." Well, it was very difficult taking that position because Sam was just an awfully good man and so well thought of. He'd been a casket bearer for Kennedy's funeral, so he was a really sharp officer. And that was the end of his career. It's just kind of the luck of the draw.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Not that many. I mean, there were worse times in Vietnam than when I was there. And then, of course, a lot depends on the Ia Drang Valley, for example, was about 6 months before I went to Vietnam. Of course, they took a lot of casualty. We were fairly lucky. We had some, but it was not a tremendous amount.
Were you ever wounded?
I wasn't wounded. In a mortar attack, I ran into some barbed wire, and I could have gotten a Purple Heart for that, but I just didn't quite think that was right. And so I got a couple stitches, and that was it. I was lucky.
What was your... Oh, you weren't wounded. Was there one particular moment where you were terrified?
Yes, there was. It was my second tour. It was we were in a convoy. I was in a Jeep, and behind the Jeep, about 100 yards, were a bunch of trucks where Vietnamese soldiers were in, and an ambush opened up on the side of the road that was a jungle. It was a dirt road, a sand road. And fortunately, the ambush hit behind my Jeep, and it hit the line of trucks. But when the firing stopped, we had to get out of the Jeep and walk back with jungle on either side of the road back to those trucks to see what the damage was and how many killed we had and so forth and wounded. And that was very, very scary walking back. And, you know, we were worried about getting ambushed and killed ourselves.
What do you think of your reaction to that fear now that you look back on it?
I think it was very realistic, and if it had happened today, I would have been just as afraid as I was then.
Was your unit well supplied?
Our units were very well supplied. I was in an air camp unit, and we got supper brought in every night, and extra mortars and machine guns for the night defensive position. And then when they come in the morning time for breakfast, they took that extra stuff out, but brought, you know, a hot meal with them for breakfast also. So we were well supplied, and we always had plenty of ammunition.
Did you ever feel that your unit did not have enough support?
No, I really didn't. We were well supported. We had lots of artillery. The division was well organized. I think we got all the support we needed and when we needed it.
How did you pass the time?
Well, of course, when we were in the field most of the time, and we came back to home base, we cleaned up, rested, wrote letters, made tapes, and it was a good thing. It wasn't like it was in this war right now where you could email. There weren't any emails in those days, and there really weren't any telephone calls, so it took about 2 weeks to have a letter go from Vietnam and get one, you know, back from your wife in the States or your kids. In the same way with these little recording tapes that we used to make.
Did you manage to stay in touch with the people back home?
We did, as I say, using letters and tapes. It was pretty effective. I mean, for those days, I mean, everything is relative, and the mail was good. I think much more so than it was during the Korean and Second World War.
What are the most important lessons being in the service has taught you?
I think taking care of those people that work for you. I mean, you take care of the people that work for you, and they turn around and they take care of you.
Do you remember when you left the service?
Well, that's when I retired. So, yeah, I certainly do. It seems like a long time ago now. It's over 20 years, so.
Where were you when the war ended? What emotions did you feel at that moment?
Well, I really hated to see us leave Vietnam personally. I don't feel that we lost the war. With the Tet Offensive in 1968, the Viet Cong were almost wiped out and the North Vietnamese suffered greatly. The problem is that the American people didn't want us to be in Vietnam any longer, so we had to get out. And but I don't really think we lost the war because, you know, the United States can win any war it gets into. It may take a period of time to do it, but and so I was kind of sad when the last people left the embassy and got on the ship.
Did you make any close friendships during your service?
Well, I made a lot of close friendships. I mean, you know, one of my best friends was a helicopter pilot, a lift pilot, who was responsible for carrying us into the landing zones for operations. And shortly after my second tour, we went to the staff college together, and we've been good friends ever since. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of close friends here in Washington State, but they're all around the country, and I see them periodically, friends that I served with during my 20-some year service.
What did you do after the war?
Well, I went back to school. I wanted to get involved in recreational management, so I went back to school for several years. I built and then worked at Fort Lewis, and for some years, and then finally retired and ended up assisting my wife and working for Diversified Gymnastics and Sport, selling and repairing gymnastics equipment.
Did your experiences in the war help you in the career you pursued after the war?
That's a good question. I think any of your experiences help you do other things in life. What you learn in school, what you learn in one job, you take with you to the next job. As I say, working with people and taking care of the people you work with as best you can as a supervisor and a leader, I think is very important. And whether you're in the service or whether you're in civilian life, it doesn't make much difference. It's very important.
How did being involved in the service change your view on warfare?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that it became very real. I mean, I had studied the great captains before Napoleon and the Civil War and the First and Second World War, and those were all things in books, and you know, I'd seen the battlefields and so forth. But when you're actually there, you know, first of all, it's up to date. It's not history anymore. It's a daily effort, and it's very real. And you have to adjust to the situation. Each war is different.
How did being in the service affect your views about the military?
Well, that's an interesting question. My views of the military were much different when I was at West Point. West Point was a very idealistic atmosphere, as are all the academies. When you get in the military, you find out how it actually is. People aren't quite so honest, and people aren't quite so efficient, and things don't work exactly as the way you want them to work. So it's a little bit different. And but my feeling about the military was always very positive.
Did being in the service change your views on anything else?
You know, I don't. It probably did. But you know, I think basically the interview here is geared towards somebody that really didn't spend a lot of time in the military, but for example, was in the Second World War, where they went in 1941 and they got out in 1945, and it was a small segment of their life and perspective that we're looking at. In my case, of course, I was I went to the military academy, and then you take my entire career in the military. You lump that all together, that's many, many years. So I really don't think my time in the service changed my views on anything else, because most of the time I was just in the service.
Are you a member of Veterans Organization? Why or why not?
Well, I belong to VFW, but I'm not really active in it, and I take retired military officer magazine, and I take the Army Times to keep up to date on what's going on in the military. But as far as belonging in an organization and doing things with the VFW and so forth, we go to those veterans celebrations on Veterans Day and things like that, normally with our grandkids, but I'm not active in any organization.
Is there anything else about your experiences in the service that you would like to tell us about?
Well, the major thing is that it was just a great experience. The whole thing, the camaraderie, the professionalism, the feeling of mission accomplishment, having a job done and well done. It was. I would recommend it to anybody. I really wish that I had stayed in longer because it's a very satisfying career. A lot depends on when you go in, and if you had gone in, if I had been class of 1939, I would have gotten World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. If you go in right now, you spend your time in the Gulf region, and so that's a different type of experience. You know, every war is different, but I wouldn't do it any different. You just take what you get and enjoy what you get and do the best you can.
Thank you very much, Roger.
Okay, press the red button.